Okay, so this question doesn't really need that long, so I'll just get started. So for this one, it says the museum's built a scale model of the solar system where 1 mile in the model is equal to 4,000 or 400 million miles in real life. And so it says the model of the sun is X miles away from the model of the Earth. Which expression represents the actual distance in miles between the Earth and the sun? And so we know that 1 mile in the model is 400 million miles in real life. And so for every 1 mile we increase in the model, which is defined as X, um, we increase the distance between the Earth and the Sun by this many miles, which translates to A. Answer choice A. Any questions? Okay, I'll give you a minute for this question. Okay, so for question 9, the first thing we would do here is look at the answer choices and see that it is asking about mean and median. So mean and median. So mean is the average, and median is the middle number. And so this question says a seventh child with a height of 60 inches. And so comparing 60 inches to the rest of the numbers in the list, 60 is greater than all of the numbers. So new number is greater than all the other numbers in the list. And so it says, which of the following correctly describes how the mean and the median of the group will change? Well, let's find the mean and median of the group right now. And so, well, actually, we don't really need to do that because this doesn't ask for specifics. And so for this one, um, the median is the middle number. And so if we add 60 to, so right now the middle number would be, since there's 6 numbers, it would be the average of the two middle numbers. So the average of 54 and 54, which would be 54. And if we add 60 to this list, then the middle number in this list would still be 54. So the median would stay the same. And then for the mean, the average, since 60 is greater than all the numbers in the list, the mean will actually increase. And so 9 becomes C. Okay. So this one, there's 2 questions for it, but first I'm just gonna show this because I can't really show the questions and this information in the same page. And so question 10 asks for, so this one it's kind of difficult for me to show both the question and the information that you need, so I'm just gonna do this one for you. So line of best fit underestimates one student's reported time spent using the internet on Saturdays by more than 2 hours. So for how many hours did the student report reading offline? And so the graph shows time spent using the internet in hours and time spent reading offline. It says 36 high school students were selected at random. During October, each student reported the average amount of time to the nearest half hour spent reading offline on Saturdays, and the average amount of time to the nearest half hour spent using the internet on Saturdays, and it shows the times recorded by students. The line of best fit is shown. And so the line of best fit underestimates a student's reported average using the internet on Saturdays by more than 2 hours. So line of best fit underestimates by more than 2 hours. So more than 2 hours. And so this question asks, how many hours did the student spend reading offline? And so we can see that it's where the line of best fit underestimates it by 2 hours, which would mean that the student actually used the internet for 2 hours more, which would translate how long did they spend reading offline. Well, for them to have spent 2 hours more than the line of best fit on the internet, we'd have to add 2 hours to that, which would get us an answer choice of B, or 1.5 hours. As you can see right here, if they spent 2 hours more. And then for question 11, if a student spends an average of 1.25 hours reading offline on Saturdays, it's time spent reading offline, and if they spend 1.25 hours, which of the following is the best estimate that they would be expected to spend using the internet on Saturdays? So it says an average of 1.25 hours. So that's between 1 and 1.5, so about right here. And we go up to the line of best fit, which would be about right here, so between 2.5 and 3, which would translate to C, between 2.5 and 3, if we just go up to the line of best fit. I couldn't really do those questions properly because I couldn't show you the information and the question on the same page. But these should be better. So I'll give you a minute for this one. Okay, so for this one, we're given that line K is defined by negative x plus 5. And so using the Slomar slope formula, y equals mx plus b, we know that the slope of this is -1 and the y-intercept is +5. And so it says line J is parallel to line K. So line J is parallel to line K, which means it should have the same slope but a different y-intercept. Although not always, it could also be, the lines could also be on top of each other, which would mean that they have the same y-intercept, but we don't know, we're not given that information, but what we do know is that they do have the same slope. So the slope, and so for this question to ask, what is the slope of line J? Well, the slope would just be the same as this one, which would just be -1, which would be A. All right, I'll give you a minute for this question. Okay, so for this question, we're given the equation 4r plus 9 equals 17. And we're told that combined, the students in both groups answered a total of 17 questions. So this is the total questions answered. And then we're given, of these, a total of 9 questions were answered by the students in group V. So 9 would be questions answered by we. And this graph, R represents the number of students answered by each student in group R. So what is the best interpretation of 4R? And so R is number of questions answered by each student in group R. And so what does 4R mean? And so in this context, 4R would mean the total number of questions answered by the students in group R, which would be C, because R is the number of questions answered by each student, and then there's probably 4 students in that group, which would make the total for group R. And then once you add all the questions answered by group we, you get 17 total questions answered. I'll give you a minute for this question. Okay, so for this question, so the first thing I want to point out is that you can actually eliminate two of the answer choices right away. So as you can see in the table, as age increases from 25 to 42, the average amount of money goes from 42 to 8. So as age increases, the average amount of money decreases. That means that the slope of this has to be negative. That means we can eliminate C and D right off the bat because they have a positive slope. And so after that, we can just use point slope formula. So y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, which gets us 8, and you can use any of the points on here. They just have to be two different points. 8 minus 42 over 42 minus 25. And then this is a calculator section, so we can use our calculator for these. This gets us a slope of -2, and the only one of these answer choices which matches the slope of -2 would be A. All right, I'll give you a minute for this question. Okay, so for the question, we're given 4x plus 1 equals 6 plus 2x plus 1. So this one we just use PEMDAS, so 4x plus 4 equals 6 plus 2x plus 2. And then we just do 4x plus 4 equals 8 plus 2x. Subtract 2x from both sides, 2x plus 4 equals 8. Subtract 4 from both sides, 2x equals 4. Divide by 2, x equals 2. And this question asks, what is the value of x plus 1? So the value of x plus 1 would be 3, which would get us an answer choice of B. It doesn't ask for x, it asks for x plus 1. And you could have also solved this slightly differently. because this equation already gives you the x plus 1 in parentheses, so you could have just substituted this, but you don't need to worry too much about that. Yeah, I'll give you a minute for this. Okay, so for this question, we're given that the initial bacteria is 10K or 10,000. And we're given that the bacteria in the population double every 12 hours. So as you can see, all these graphs are in multiples of 24. So let's translate this. So if it doubles every 12 hours, then every 24 hours, it will become 4 times. And so that means that the point should be 0, 10,000, because that's where it starts. And then after 24 hours, so 24, the second point should be 1,000 or 10,000 times 4, so 40,000. And so, which one of these graphs have that? Well, A starts at 0, 1,000, and 24, and 40,000, so it would be A. And we can check our answer by looking at the other graphs. B starts at the right place, but it only goes up to 30,000 when it's at 24. C only goes up to 20,000, and D only goes up to 15,000. So it is A. All right, I'll give you a minute for question 18. Okay, so question 18 asks us about range. And so in a box plot, you have a couple of things. So the range is from one end to the other end. The interquartile range is from Q1, or this is called Q1, and this is called Q3, or at least in a box plot. And this is the median or the middle number. It's not mean, it's median. This is the range. This is IQR. And so this question asks us about the range. Which of these data sets has a range of 6? And so for data set A, it would be 2 and 6. 6 minus 2 is 4, so it can't be data set A. It definitely can't be data set B, that's just too big. Same for C. For D, it's 9 minus 3, which is 6, so it would be data set D, which would translate to D. Okay, I'll give you a minute for question 19. Okay, so for this one, it says forest has different kinds of trees. T is the total. H is hickory. And K is oak. And so it says if a tree is selected at random, which expression represents the probability of selecting a tree that is neither hickory nor oak? So it's none of these, meaning that there's probably more trees than just these two. So hickory plus oak cannot equal total. There must be other trees. And so let's go through the answer choices. So for A, it says hickory plus oak divided by the total. You know what? Let me rewrite this first. So first we have hickory plus oak. So H plus K plus an unknown variable because we don't know how many trees are left. So let's just do question mark equals the total. And now we have to reformat this so that the question mark is by itself. And so we have H plus K equals total plus question mark. Oh, minus question mark. 3 plus oak minus the total equals negative question mark, which gets us negative h minus k plus t equals what we're trying to find. So now that we have everything on the right side of the equation, we have to see which one of these matches this. And so h plus k over t. Okay, does this translate to that? Not really. For B, we have the total minus hickory minus what is it? Oak divided by the total. Okay, that one might be it. And then C, we have hickory plus the number of oak, and we're subtracting the total from that, and then we're dividing by the total. Okay, so for this one, what I would recommend is setting values for all of these. So let's say the total numbers of trees are 50, and the number of hickory is like 20, and the number of oak is like 20. And so for an unknown variable, we should get 10, right? So for A, if we do 20 plus 20 and divided by 50, it's 40 over 50. We would not get 10. Does not equal 10. And so for B, we have total, which is 50 minus 20 minus 20. Oh, I see. This is asking for the probability of selecting a tree that is neither hickory nor oak. So so we would get, there are 10 trees that are, so in this situation, there would be like 10 trees that are not hickory or oak. So the probability would be 1 out of 10, or not 1 out of 10. It's 10 out of 50, or 1 out of 5. So so for answer choice B, it would be 10, 50 minus 20 minus 20 over the total, which is 50, which is 1 over 5, which is the probability of selecting a tree that is neither hickory nor oak. So the answer choice would be B. What I forgot is that this isn't asking for the percentage of the other trees, it's asking for the probability of selecting a tree that is neither hickory nor oak. But if I get messed up, what I try doing is just substituting values in for these numbers. So that would be B. All right, I'll give you a minute for this. Okay, so this is the vertex form of a parabola. And so the normal vertex form is a x minus h squared plus k. We're given that for this equation, a is negative, or -1 to be exact, or at least that's because the original equation is a x minus h squared plus k, but for this one it says the graph of y equals negative x plus h squared plus k. So we know that a is -1, and we know that h and k are positive. So h is positive and k is positive. And so it asks which quadrant is the vertex of a parabola. So for this one, can it be in quadrant 1? Well, no, because a is -1. That means it has to be sort of like this. And we know that it has to, so that means because a is negative like this, it can either only be in quadrant 2 or quadrant 3. And because both h and k are positive, we know that it has to be in quadrant 2, which would be answer choice B. And so A just means is it in quadrant 2 or quadrant 3? Because this is just like left and right. If it's negative, it can only be in quadrant 2 and 3. If it's positive, it can only be in quadrant 1 and 4. And then you have to look at the H's and K's and see if it's both positive or if they're opposite signs. Okay, I'll give you a minute for this one. Okay, so for this one, we're given that at the beginning there were 500 items for sale. So 500 is initial. And then we're given the number of items for sale at the end of the day was R% less than the number at the beginning of the day. So if it's R%, the point here is the percent, meaning that it has to be divided by 100. So it can only be either A, B, or C. And we know that, okay, so for this one, it says R% less. If it said R% more, it would be 100 plus R over 100. But this says R% less, so it's 100 minus R over 100. So let's say if it's like 5% less, if you do 100 minus 5, you have 95 over 100 times, say, the 500, which would get you lost 5%. So it makes sense, which would mean that the answer choice here would have to be A. So R% less means that it's a minus. If it says R% more, it would be a plus. And because it's a percent, you're dividing by 100. All right, question 22. We'll give you a minute. Okay, so we're given, for this one, we're given the area of a right triangle. And we're given the equation A equals 1/2 B 2B. And so the original equation of a triangle is A equals 1/2 base times height. And so using this, we know that, and using the information in the question, it says B is the length of inches of one of the legs of the triangle. So we know that B would be one of these, and then H, or the height, would just be 2B. And so this question asks, what is the length in inches of the shortest leg of a triangle? Well, since this is a right triangle, we know that the hypotenuse has to be longer than the longest side length. So we know that this has to be the longest. And so this says, which is the shortest? Well, the shortest would be just B, or answer choice B. All right, I'll give you a minute. Okay, so someone asked if we get formulas on the SAT. So if you actually scroll up to the top of the math section, where you'll see this page that says math test calculator, and you see these formulas, this is all they're going to give. So you will get that formula, but you won't get all the formulas, but you will get these. So at the very start of the math section, you'll see math test calculator, use of, and then some directions, some notes, and then it'll give you some reference materials. This is what you get. So you get most of the area formulas and most of the perimeter formulas. Okay, so for this one, we're given that there's 94 ice cores that were taken, and each section, so each core was in the shape of a right circular cylinder. So we're given each one's, so one core is in the cylinder form, and we're given it has a length of 1 meter and a diameter of 0.1 meter. And so let's use that formula sheet, which I just pointed out. So if we scroll to the very top, so for this, we're given that the volume is pi r squared times the height. That's the cylinder formula, pi r squared times the height. Also, it is better if you try memorizing these formulas because you see how you have to flip back and forth. So that actually does take quite a bit of time on the actual SAT, but it is there for you if you need it. And so, which is the volume of the total volume? Okay, well, we know the volume is pi r squared times the height. And so, well, what is the radius? Well, the radius is the diameter divided by 2. So 0.05 meters. And for this, it says length of 1 meter. So I'm assuming that would be the height. So this would just be 1, which has no impact on the formula usually. So this one we are allowed to use a calculator. So 0.05 times pi, which gets us oh wait, hold on. It's 0.05 squared because it's the radius squared times pi, which gets us 0.007854, and we're given that the volume of the 94 sections, so times 94, which gets us 0.738274, which is closest to 0.7 or answer choice D. So I don't think you're going to be able to see this calculator work. Maybe we can, I don't know. But basically, diameter divided by 2, 0.05, and then you square that because that's the radius squared. And then the height is 1, so it doesn't really affect anything. And then times pi, which gets us this. And then you multiply this by 94 because it said 94 sections. 0.7, which is okay. Question number 24. I'll give you a minute. Okay, so question 24, given this image, and it says, which of the following additional statements are sufficient to prove that DEF is similar to HFG? And so let's actually try these and see. So the length of DE is a third of the length of HG. Well, this one can't prove it. And then, for example, let's say you have the triangle like this, or you know what? I can make this work. Okay, so let's say this is a length of 3 and this is a length of 1. This means that 1 is true, the length of DE is 1/3 the length of HG, but it, as you can see, these triangles aren't similar. They're not the same triangle, just a different size. This one is more of like, but you get what I mean. It's like, it's not the same triangle. So 1 is not enough. And then for 2, DE is parallel to HG. So for the second one, we know that this line and this line are parallel. And this, and this. And let's say, yeah, so no matter what you do for part 2, it will always create triangles that are similar. If 2 lines are parallel and you're drawing 2 lines between them to make 2 different triangles, they will always be similar triangles. So like, let's do an extreme example. Sort of like this. And you see how they're both have this angle would match this angle, and then this angle would match this inner angle, and then these 2 angles would always match. So they would always be similar no matter what you do, as long as these 2 lines are parallel and you're drawing and you're making 2 triangles between them. So for 24, 1 is not sufficient and 2 is sufficient, which would be answer choice B. All right, I'll give you a minute for this one. Okay, so for this one, we're given a scatter plot and a line of best fit, and it says which data point has an actual value that is 2 more than the value predicted. That means it has to be 2 higher. And so while you the first thing you might do is see that 6 and like 38 is 2 lines higher, but that would actually be incorrect. And the reason why is that the Y scale doesn't actually go up by 1, but it actually goes up by 2. So 36, and then the next line is 38, and then the next line after that is 40. And so the correct answer here would actually be D, 530, because as you can see, the line of best fit for that predicts it right here, which is about 28, and then 530 is 2 more than that. So it would be answer choice D. All right, I'll give you a minute for this. Okay, so for this one, we're given that a plant's height is 1.25 times its height for last week. So 1 times means it would be the same height. So 1.25 times means that it's 25% more than just 1 times, or than just what it was last week, which would mean that for 26, the correct answer choice would be D. If this said something like 1.75 times, then that would be 75% more. If it was like 0.8, then it would be 20% less, etc., etc. All right, question 28. I'll give you a minute. Okay, so for this one, there's a few ways we could solve it. We could either rearrange these variables, or we can also try plugging in. So let's try the plugging in method. So p% of x is 3. So let's say p is like 10%. Well, then what would x be? X would have to be 30 then. And so which of the following represents x in terms of p? So for a, we have 3 over p. So 3 over 10%, which that's a. Okay, and then b, we have 3 times 10%, or 100. C, we have 100 times 3 over 10%. And then D, we have 10% over 100 times 3. And so for A, we have 3 over 10, which is not equal to X. For C, hold on, what were we on? All right, so for B, we have 30 over 10, which is 3. Is X 3? No. X would have to be 30. So for C, we have 300 over 10, which would just simplify to 30, which is correct. And then D, we have 10 over 300, which is just 1 over 30, which is not equal to X. Because using these values, X would have to equal 30. So the correct answer for question 28 should be C. And so for questions where, so for these type of questions, you could always just try plugging in a number for the variable, and the answer should match. Question 27, I'll give you a minute. Okay, so for this one, we're given that pine trees between 15 and 45 years grow from 36 to 48 inches a year. And we're given that the current tree is 15. And what is its height going to be at 45? And so for this one, we know that this has to be an inequality with a minimum and a maximum value, so it can't be A or B. And so the only answer is we have to look at our C and D. And so we know that the tree does grow every year, and it starts at 240. So at the end of the 45th year, even if it grew the least amount every time, which would be 36 inches, it would still have grown higher, much higher than 240. So it can't be answer choice C. So it would have to be answer choice D. And we can also just check this using our calculator. So if we have 36 inches a year and we have 45 minus 15, that's a difference of 30 years. So if it grew the minimum amount every year, which is 36 inches, and there was a difference between when it started, which was 15 years, and when it ended, which was 45 years, of 30 years, which would get us 1,080 inches, and then we would have to add that to the start, which, I mean, just using the answer choices, you can tell that there's only one answer choice, which has a number in 1,000, which would be answer choice D, and it can't be B because it doesn't have a starting and an ending inequality. So yeah. All right, I'll give you a minute. Okay, so for this one, we have the function 3 to the power of negative 2 x plus 1. And we're said what is equivalent for the y-intercept of the graph. And so the y-intercept of the graph is where x is 0. So if we would substitute 0 in for x here, we would get 3 to the negative 2 times 1, which would just be 1 over 9, because 3 to the negative first is 1/3, and 3 to the negative second is 1/9. Basically, if you have a number, let's say y to the power of a negative thing, to 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 remove this negative, you just have 1 over y to the x. So this will just become that. And so 3 to the negative second power is just 1 over 3 squared, which is just 1 over 9. And so we need to find which answer choice is equal to that at x equals 0. And so we have, for answer choice A, 1/3 to the power of, well, 2 times 0 is just, so 1/3 to the power of 2, which is not equal. We have 1 over 9, and then 1/3 to the power of 2, and then x would just be 0. So 1/3 to the 0th power is just 1, and then 1 times 1/9 is just 1/9, so it would be answer choice B. But let's just go through the rest. So 81 to the power, so we have negative 1/2 x, x is 0, so we just have 81 to the power of negative 1/2, which is not 1/9. This would just translate to 1 over 81 to the power of 1/2, which is not 9. And then D, we have 3 to the negative 2x, so x is just 0, so 3 to the power of negative 2. Wait. Oh. Yeah, but 29 would be B. Someone asked why is the answer not A? And so for A, Let me put this in the calculator because we are allowed to use a calculator in this section. So we have oh, the reason why it's not A is because the equation says which of the following gives the equivalent forms of the given function. So while A and B have the same y-intercept, A is not equivalent to this function. So as you can see, which of the following is equivalent forms of the given function f, not just which of the following has the same y-intercept. So for A, is this the same function as f of x? So if we wanted to make this equivalent, we could just do 3 to the negative 2 x plus 1, which should just be 3 to the negative 2x minus 2, which would just translate into 1 over 3. Oh, wait, 1 over 9 times 1 over 3. And then, because remember how anything to the negative power would just be 1 over that number? And so this would be 1 over 9 and then 1 over 3. And then you still have the 2x left over here, which would get us in the answer choice of B. Because while A is technically have the same y-intercept, it's not the same function. No, so 1/3 isn't the y-intercept. It's what you get when you do 3 to the negative first power. Because this is a negative 2 times x plus 1. We have the x plus 1 here. So for this to work, we'd have to do 3 to the negative first power, which would just be 1/3, times the 1/9 because you have the negative 2x. And you'd have the 2x left over in the end answer. Any other questions? Okay, question 30. I'll give you a minute. Okay, so basically this one says you have two samples, and it says if the associated margin of error was calculated the same way, which of the following is most like a reason that A has a larger margin of error. And so for margin of error, the main thing that affects it is the size of the sample. And so as you can see, if you have a lower margin of error, you have a much larger sample. And so that would actually translate to answer choice B. Sample B had more visitors than sample A because you have a larger sample, so you have a smaller margin of error. They are inversely related. Also, for question 29, I want to explain it a little bit better because my explanation kind of sucked. And so for this, it says, um, which of the following equivalent forms as the base coefficient the y. So when you have an equation, you have, or an exponential equation, you have a number, let's say y, to the power of something, right? And so this says, and so for this equation, y would be the base and x would be what it's raised to. And this says, which of the following has the base coefficient as the y coordinate. And so the y coordinate for this function as we calculated was 1 over 9. And so we have to have the base as 1 over 9. And so the only equation here that has a base of 1/9 is B. That's sort of a little bit of a better explanation because it does ask specifically for the base being the coefficient or being the y-intercept. That might be a little bit of a better explanation. I'll give you a minute for question one. Okay, so for this one, we have 1/8 of a millimeter a year. And so it says how many years would it take for it to grow 4 millimeters? So for it to grow 1 whole millimeter, it would take 8 years because it's 1/8 millimeters a year. So it would take 8 years, 8 times 1/8 for 1 millimeter. And it says how long will it take for it to grow 4 millimeters? So 8 years for 1 mm. So if we want 4 millimeters, we just multiply it by 4. That's 32 years. So this would just be 32 years. You obviously wouldn't bubble in years. You just bubble in 32. All right, question 32. I'll give you a minute.
Pusha, after this question, we will end the session. Can you hear me?
Yeah, okay. And so for this one, we're given x plus y equals 10, and we have x minus y equals 4. And so for this one, instead of doing all the substitution and getting it all by its sides, we're just going to do elimination strategy. So we just do a minus here like this. And so x minus x is 0. Y minus negative y is just 2y, because negative and negative makes a positive. So 2y equals 10 minus 4 is 6. And so using this, we get y equals 6 divided by 2, or 3. And then we have x plus y equals 10. And so x plus 3 equals 10, because we're substituting in y. X equals 7. And this asks us, what is the value of 2x? So 2x would just be double this. So it would be 14. Okay, I think that's it.
Okay. How many questions are left of this question paper? Okay, we'll continue with the rest next week. Thank you everybody for joining us. We'll see you again on next Sunday. If you have questions, you can unmute yourself and ask, that's fine. Thank you so much for joining us. See you next week. Bye-bye.